Hey guys, Argent Templar here. So this is in response to a request. One of my subscribers, Matthew, asked that I start doing longer movie reviews in which I do a complete summary of the movie in addition to political commentary. So these will probably be substantially longer than the normal reviews. The goal of these isn't really to review it as much as just to kind of dissect the themes and kind of try to relate it to stuff. Also, if you just don't want to see the movie, hopefully I will be able to go over all of it. So I figured a good place to start is Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, because I meant to do reactionary reviews of the various Star Wars movies for a while. I just hadn't really got into it. Um, so I have actually done some notes and stuff for this. So, Star Wars Episode 1 The Phantom Menace is the first Star Wars movie in I think about 30 years after the end of Return of the Jedi. I really like the original trilogy. I'll probably get to it. Maybe I'll do a reaction review of each Star Wars movie, going through the plot as we go. So, Star Wars Episode 1 The Phantom Menace takes place during the Old Republic era. So, we'll talk about the Old Republic a bit more as we go. But our story begins on the planet of Naboo, where some sort of organization called the Trade Federation has blockaded the planet because the Republic created a tax on trade routes. So, this is kind of, I think, that the single biggest problem with the Phantom Menace is the central plot is never really explained. So we have the trade. So we have a tax on trade routes. So there's some organization called the Trade Federation. We can't really tell if they're bureaucrats or like a corporation. They later refer to trade franchise, so I think they're a state-sanctioned monopoly on trade, judging from dialogue later in the film. I don't understand why, though, that they think blockading Naboo will resolve anything. Apparently, in the novelization, it's revealed that Naboo has plasma reserves, which is kind of like the Star Wars universe's equivalent of oil. But we never get an actual explanation for why the Trade Federation is blockading Naboo. My best guess is that Naboo is a very pro-Republic planet, and the Trade Federation felt by making an example out of Naboo, they would scare the other systems into voting to repeal the tax on trade routes. They deliberately picked a peaceful planet, probably to show that no one is above them. That whoever you are, wherever you come from, um, whatever your planet is, if you don't support the repeal of the tax on trade routes, and you don't, if you don't refuse to collect the tax, then we will invade you. That's my best guess. It could just be that they took advantage of the opportunity to invade Naboo to steal the oil, I mean plasma. It's very hard to tell. So, Chancellor Valorum, who is the Chancellor of the Republic, how the Republic works is kind of not really explained. It seems to me that each system elects a senator, system being several different worlds, and all these senators meet in the Galactic Senate and they vote on things and basically function as a galactic parliament. Outside of some limited tax abilities, an ability to pass resolutions, and to dispatch the Jedi, the Republic doesn't really seem to have much of a role. Sure, there's Republic credits, but they don't seem to be accepted in a lot of places. So overall, that more or less seems like a useless institution. I think probably the best metaphor, and this is kind of confirmed in the sequel, is the Old Republic is a bit like what the American federal government was, particularly during the Articles of Confederation era, in which the federal government was not strong enough to really stand up to the states in any significant way. And the Federalists and George Washington passed the Constitution to try and establish a balance of power between the two sides. So the Republic seems to have virtually no power. It possesses no standing army, no ability to levy armed forces, and no real money. The only thing it really seems to have is Jedi, who function as kind of secret police for the regime of the Old Republic. Now, why do I say that? Granted, they aren't secret, but the Jedi's role seems to be they show up and kill the leadership, or show up and kill the leadership of anyone who opposes the Republic. If you have a Jedi who can use the Force and a lightsaber, you don't need an army, because a Jedi can just go find the leadership, take them out, or do other things to devastate them. I mean, think about it. If Jedis can use mind tricks, they can convince like a pilot to crash their ship into like a planet or something. They don't really need anything like that. They could use the Force to pull off wires in a shield generator behind a force field, etc. So Chancellor Valorum plays the only card he can and sends the Jedi Knights Qui-Gon Jinn, which is a bizarre name, and Obi-Wan Kenobi, who will later appear in the original trilogy, on a secret mission to meet with the Trade Federation and settle the crisis. For whatever reason, the Trade Federation decides not to meet with them, and instead they pump in gas to try to kill them, because some shadowy figure named Darth Sidious tells them to do it. What exactly the Darth Sidious promised them, I'm not really sure. Why exactly they're doing it, I'm not really sure. So I'm gonna make something up, because that's what you have to do when you're watching a movie that's not really well put together. So my guess is that the Old Republic runs on the non-aggression principle, or NAP, and it's basically kind of a decentralized libertarian paradise. Sure, we have the Galactic Senate, but they lack any kind of real powers. The government doesn't have an army. The various member states are allowed to maintain their own armies and own armadas, and there's unlimited rights to weapons, including weapons that can go blow planets up. As Uncuck the Right song goes, a nuke in everyone's hand. So the Galactic Republic runs on the NAP, and generally speaking, the white humans observe the NAP, and they don't really seem to get into fights with one another that much, or just a local thing. They don't tend to go to galactic warfare. But unfortunately, we have the Numidians. Now, the Numidians are basically China economy strong. Well, I guess I owe you one. China Numidian economy strong, blockading Naboo for strong economy for Numidia. Yeah, so the Numidians, or however the fuck you pronounce their names, they're kind of like China economy strong. Like, they're obviously supposed to be East Asians, and they don't really give a shit. They just want money. They don't really care about all this like high trust altruism stuff. They just want to make money, so they're just doing it. So the Republic's like, shit, someone violated the NAP. What do we do? We can't make an army because that would be initiating the use of force. So yeah, they don't really know because there's no federal government. And I think this is kind of a ongoing issue where everybody, particularly in the later movies, they're like, oh, democracy's being overthrown. They're instituting an army of the Republic. How dare they have an army of the Republic? Well, all states have always had have had armies of some description. It's just the way it is. If there's no balance of power between the state and the provinces, then either the state will become a totalitarian, centralized, centrally planned hell, or the provinces will just do shit like what the Numidians do. Because there's no central army that can go in, and if one of them decides we're going to be thugs and we're going to go in, stage a corporate takeover of Naboo, there's just nothing they can really do about it to stop them. So if Numidia decides to go Numidian economy strong, there's really nothing they can do about it. So yeah, so they basically they try to kill the Jedi Knights. Why exactly, we're not sure. Maybe they're it's just part of their whole China thing. They're like, Jedi Knights don't make Numidian economy strong, because they were trying to stop them from stealing shit. So anyways, they try to kill the Jedis because they're symbols of the Republic. So the Jedis sneak aboard a transport and land on the surface of the planet, where the Numidians have deployed a drone army. Once again, an obvious metaphor for China given their performance in the Korean War. China have so many soldiers, they go to death like droids to make economy strong. Something like that. I actually hadn't even thought about it, but yeah, the Midians, between their droid armies, they're invading random planets to steal natural resources. Their accents and their clothing are obviously China economy strong. Also, the fact they don't give a shit what the UN says. So they land on the planet and they run into Jar Jar Binks. Now, the Gungans are very strange. They're probably the most liberal thing about them, this movie, because for whatever reason, they have Caribbean accents. Although no society in the Caribbean has built anything near what they've built. And you're saying, well, that's not fair. No one's built anything like in Star Wars. That's not really true. I mean, Naboo looks pretty similar to some old European cities I've been to. The architecture there is certainly not out of reach, particularly in a lot of European capitals. True Coruscant is pretty fantastic, but it's not like it's that big a step above New York City. It's just kind of like a futuristic version of it. Aside from the flying cars, but I mean, we have technology to make skyscrapers. We could build stuff in that shape, and we have built stuff in kind of that shape. The Caribbean though has done nothing near what the Gungans did. The Gungans are these kind of weird frog people who have a warrior culture, but it's like a really lame warrior culture. Their weapons are primitive to say the least. They throw goo at people, or they use slings and stuff in an era where most people have guns. They haven't developed guns. They haven't really developed most modern technologies. They somehow live under the ocean. My guess is that the Naboo built the city for them because they were tired of the Gungans like being on welfare and like clogging up their cities and just causing societal destruction, and the Gungans didn't do nothing. So because they didn't do nothing, they were rewarded with an underwater city, and they can maintain it largely due to the fact that they can breathe underwater. So if any part of the city collapses, they're okay. Why an aquatic people need to build a city that has uh, air in it? I don't really know. Maybe electronics can't work underwater. Anyway, so they use Jedi mind tricks to steal a ship from the Gungans. Although to be honest, I think it's just low. I think it's just high time preference. I just think the Gungans have such high time preference. If you just ask them to do anything, they'd be like, "Oh man, here's a ship. Man, we might need that ship later." But they don't really think like that. So yeah, so repeating, going along with the whole colonial narrative, the white guys tricked the Caribbeans into giving them shit. Yeah, because of high time preference versus low time preference. So they go to the capital with the ship, and they rescue the queen. Now, for whatever reason, Naboo has a queen. She's an elected queen, and she seems to function kind of like a president. Why they have a democratically elected queen, I don't know. Why they don't have an army, I don't know. I guess they just kind of swipples or something, and they're like, we don't need guns. Guns are bad. The republic that has no army will protect us. Or something like that. So they go to the capital, which has been taken over by the Trade Federation, and the queen, and they save the queen, who is popularly elected. Now she's very young, so they manage to get on board a ship, and they leave orbit. The Trade Federation probably could have stopped them pretty easily, but they made a couple calculations, and they figured that the resources it would take to stop them would reduce the GDP growth of the Numidian Trade Federation by 0.00001% and would not contribute to making Numidia economy strong. So they decided to not stop them. So then their ship runs away, and they go to Naboo. Sorry, to Tatooine. Tatooine is pretty much a fairly accurate depiction of what the Middle East is like, or at least how it used to be. Um, traditionally speaking, most Arabic societies were run solely on the basis of slave labor. In a lot of cases, the Muslims didn't really do much work. They either had Christians who paid immense taxes. I call it the infidel tax, or jizya as it's called, for not being Muslim, and that money was used to support their Muslim overlords. In many cases, they didn't. They discouraged conversion so that there would be a Christian minority majority to pay for everything, or they would bring in slaves, largely from Africa. So Tatooine basically functions like this. We have Arabs and the Sand People. We have a lot of just shady characters who hide out there because there's really, it's pretty chaotic. ISIS probably has a couple bases on Tatooine. Maybe the Sand People are actually ISIS. Maybe that'll be the plot of The Force Awakens. That would be a pretty great plot. But anyway, so they go to Tatooine, which is a desert planet, because their ship's damaged, and they come across Watto the Merchant. And I mean merchant in all phrases of the word. He is a merchant by profession and a merchant by race. As he says, my tricks don't work on me, only money. Yeah, I wonder why. Also, dat nose and dat beard. I think that's enough said about that. So yeah, so they come across Watto because he's the only person who has the part apparently, um, which is kind of Beer's reality in a lot of ways. Because I'm the only person who can offer you an interest rate this low. Don't comparison shop, just buy it. So yeah, so Watto basically pulls the oldest sales trick a merchant can pull. It says no, no one else has these parts. Just me. I'm the only one who's got these parts. You got to buy them from me. And they're like, will you take Republic credits? And he's like, no, I won't take that fiat currency issued by the Republic Reserve that my uncle runs. I want real money. But I thought you told us not to invest in real money. No, that's just for you non. What were they called again? Non-Troidarians. That's just for you non-Troidarians. The Troidarians always invest in money, in real money like gold or ship parts or other physical goods. We don't buy into the whole galactic reserve system, even if we do control it. So Watto says, unless you can get my uncle who runs the Galactic Reserve to give me some money, it's just not gonna play out. While they're there, they come across Anakin Skywalker, who is a white slave, which is traditionally how it worked in the Middle East. Most of the slaves were white. Um, the pirates, the Barbary pilots, who were kind of like the jihadis of their day, would sail across the coast of Europe and capture whites and take them back, largely to be repeatedly raped. The blonder the better, the lighter skin the better. Arabs have a fetish for that kind of thing. So who knows what Watto's doing to him with that big nose of his? It's the whole thing's pretty creepy to be honest. So his mother is also Watto's slave, and I don't even want to think about what he does with her. Maybe he's using her to breed his heirs. I don't know. So we find out that Anakin is kind of like a Jedi version of Jesus. He is born of a virgin, conceived of the Force. He suffered under Obi-Wan Kenobi, had his legs cut off, was lit on fire. On the third day, he was cybernetically enhanced. He is seated at the right hand of the Father of the Empire, from which he will come to deliver judgment upon the Rebel Alliance. So yeah, that's kind of like the Apostles' Creed if it was written by George Lucas. So yeah, so we have Anakin Skywalker, who is a kind of Jesus, and he forms a strong friendship with Padme, and he thinks that she's an angel, which is an interesting statement because God doesn't seem to exist in the Star Wars universe, but apparently angels do. It's just very strange. So he's apparently like super, like he's a Jedi, because everybody in this movie is a Jedi, and he wins a race, and they win the parts to fix the ship. I know I'm kind of skipping over a lot of stuff here, but there's just not that much interesting that happens, other than Watto, Anakin, and ISIS and slavery. Also, I'm pretty sure Watto's probably funding the Sand People. He probably funds the Sand People to go and destroy people's stuff so that they have to go and buy things from him, like the merchant that he is. So then they go to Coruscant, and there's a long scene of them deliberating and voting. So it's basically just kind of like the U.S. Congress. The government's incredibly corrupt and incompetent, so they need to implement a strong challenger, a strong chancellor, because they realize that the NAP really doesn't work. Because it ignores human nature. So, like, okay, guys, the non aggression principle just isn't working. We need to actually have a real government that can do shit. So they elect Palpatine Chancellor, because he's apparently the senator from Naboo, which is kind of weird. And he becomes Chancellor, and he's like, "Are you gonna do something, Palpatine?" No, not really. I'm not really gonna do much. Um, you guys are just gonna have to go deal with this. I'm gonna go clean up corruption. Ironically, Palpatine actually does kind of clean up corruption. The Empire seems a lot less corrupt and a lot more efficiently run than the Republic is. People are wearing uniforms. There's proper like regulation. People do things by the book. So it seems like he actually does bring order to a cluttered bureaucracy that didn't really do much. And the Empire certainly saw a massive increase in public works projects, probably with similar tax rates. They certainly built a lot more stuff. They advanced a great deal in technology, and it does seem that they made the bureaucratic efficiency in law enforcement a lot more efficient compared to the Old Republic era, or the twilight of the Old Republic era. So the people eventually kind of realize the non-aggression principle isn't working, so they send the Jedi's back to ally with the Gungans, and they're going to go capture the Viceroy. The Viceroy is kind of busy making Numidian economy strong, and he doesn't really seem to understand that just because he has a massive army, he can't stand up to the Aryan wrath of Qui-Gon Jinn, who is an Irish Superman, and Ewan McGregor, who's a Scottish Superman. So they go all Celtic rage on China economy strong, who haven't seen guys that big before. But they have this good sense to get the Gungans to be their meat shield. So they go back to Naboo. The Republic doesn't send them any help. The Gungans are their meat shield. They use the Gungans to block to distract the enemies. The enemies are like Numidian economy strong, army crush, Dindus to make economy strong. So they send their entire army, but they had forgot to read their own book, and they hadn't read The Art of War, because the whole thing was a distraction. So Queen Amidala, Anakin, and the two Jedi's, they go and they capture the Viceroy. And unfortunately, because of massive incompetence and corruption in the ruling Numidian Communist Party, their ship gets blown up when Anakin shoots something because it was made in China and the armor plating on the fusion reactor was non existent. Because it was subcontracted out to a local party boss who pocketed the money and used it to buy a factory and a bunch of Nabooian sweatshop workers. Maybe some Wookiee sweatshop workers. Maybe he used it to go and like get some Wookiees and cut them up and use their parts as aphrodisiacs. That seems like something a Numidian would do. So they have a fight against Darth Maul. Darth Maul gets killed. Darth Maul's not kind of a non-entity in this movie. He's Darth Sidious's kind of hitman. I don't know who the hell he's supposed to be. I can't even think of any jokes for him because he's so bland. So they kill him. Palpatine becomes more powerful. Qui-Gon Jinn dies for no reason, and Obi-Wan Kenobi decides that he's going to raise Anakin Skywalker. So it ends with a one of the Gungan leaders holding up this giant orb, which is never explained, and then the film closes. So what can be said about Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace? It's not the worst movie. I don't think it's as bad as Attack of the Clones. It certainly did feel like a Star Wars movie. The plot, as you may have picked up on from this review, is very long, complicated, and the character development is basically non-existent. The original trilogy really didn't have much of a plot a lot of the time. It just kind of had a central kind of go there, do this thing kind of video game plot. And this movie had a lot more of a fleshed out plot that drove events, but it was at the cost of really boring, bland, unmemorable characters. So it's kind of an interesting trade off. I don't think all the ideas they came up with, like trying to explore the Old Republic, etc., was bad. The core flaw of Phantom Menace was they kind of wanted it to be a kids movie but also an adult movie, and they wound up not doing either one good. They didn't really explain any of the politics of it in a coherent fashion, as you may have guessed by how many times I've said. I guess I don't know, or just made some shit up because they obviously didn't explain it in the movie. Um, so So that's kind of a core problem because they really could, because it didn't cut down the amount of time politics took up, and that's the issue. If they had have cut out all the political scenes and just replaced it with action to be more kid friendly, that would have been fine. If they had have kept it but taken the audience a bit more seriously and kind of explored some of this stuff a bit more and actually explained things better, that also would have made it better. Um, Having a plot versus character focused movie is fine, but the plot has to hold up. So Phantom Menace, I think, is very much a movie that was just over bloated. It didn't really pick anything and develop, etc. Its politics are actually fairly interesting if you dissect them. That's something I'll give all the Star Wars movies. They certainly do give you a lot of food for thought. Even if it's not always done the best, they do cram a lot of different political ideas into it. Now, granted, a lot of this was just me making jokes, etc. But there are real issues in this movie. The idea that government has to be big enough to protect us, but if it gets too big, it becomes tyrannical. Um, the idea that in kind of a libertarian society, corporations would basically be able to act like independent governments with their own police forces. Um, the ability of intergalactic or international economics as being more powerful than sovereign nations. The justification of using a secret police force in the case of the Jedi to take down enemies of the state. Um, how far you can go to protect the thing. Uh, how far you can go in compromising something to protect it. These are all. There's a lot of interesting issues in the Phantom Menace. It's just too bad it doesn't really explore any of them in depth. So this was kind of an experiment. If you can get through this whole thing, tell me if you like it or not. Um, I tried to go through the entire plot and kind of give more commentary and make some more jokes about it. Hopefully this is good enough. This is Argent Templar signing out.